Alright, gonna do a little bit of spraying, show a couple different thinners. I took some opaque blue, straight up opaque blue. I mixed one with the illustration base. This one is Future as a thinner, half and half. These paints are thick. I mean, that's all there is to it. I'll demonstrate that. Put a little on here. Okay. That's pretty thick. That's not 2% milk. It'd be just running right off. These paints are thick. I mean, let's be honest. These are, or were, designed to be t-shirt paints. They're designed to be blasted at high pressure onto fabric. And they're flexible, so they can be worn. They heat set, so the more you heat them, the more they set, so they can be washed and dried. Now these paints have been reformulated twice that I'm aware of. They enhanced the sprayability. This was several years ago. And then they changed them again. I don't know what they did, but I guess they found more and more people using them on porous or non-porous surfaces. And they tried to make them a little more sprayable, probably thinned them out a little better. That bottle I just showed is a little bit older bottle, so it's probably not the latest formulation, but regardless, you've got to thin these paints. You can use them on plastic models. You can't be blasting the model at 50 plus PSI. It's going to be too brutal, and that's not what you're trying to do with a plastic model. You want to put on a nice thin coat. So there's your first mark against them, or first and second, because of the flexibility. Got a piece here. I've sanded it. I haven't primed it, but it's a piece of styrene, and I sanded it down real good with some 600. So just to remove the step of spraying primer, I went ahead and just sanded it and left the same almost surface that you'd get from a primer. I'm gonna spray the top half with the Createx with the Createx thinner, and I'm gonna spray the bottom half with the Future. The reason I'm doing that is because I can heat set this and dry it quick, mask over it, and then spray the other quicker than using the Future. Future takes a little longer to dry. Got to mention the airbrush and the needle and pressures. Like I said, you got to spray the stuff extremely high pressure as it comes. They say it's airbrush ready, yeah, with a big needle and high pressure. We're trying to thin it down and trying to go to somewhat smaller needles. I mean, most guys are using precision airbrush. Your popular modeling airbrushes are a fairly fine needle airbrush. I'm going to use the Badger 155, which is I love this airbrush because it's an all-purpose airbrush. Has a dual needle, so it's universal. The first half of the airbrush, the first half of the needle territory is real fine. It can spray a pencil line. Once you get past the halfway point, that area is real wide. So this airbrush with the same needle can spray from a pencil line to a 3-inch wide pattern. That's why I'm using this airbrush for this demonstration, because I don't want to be fighting with a specific airbrush and needle and orifices and pressures and all that. I'm just wanting to speak more of the spraying of the paint. Alright, I'm going to start with the Createx with the Createx thinner, and I just put a drop on here, and you can see that it's pretty thick. That's not milk-like. It will be running a whole lot faster. But when you're using the mediums, you can't go overboard with it because it will start affecting the paint, the drying time, and adhesion and stuff. So I'm going to put a little in there, and I may go ahead and thin it some more. Let me do some test spraying. I'm at about 30 psi, and I'm pulling back, to the big needle size, and I'm kind of at a distance. Now you see how it's kind of speckly? That's normal. Believe it or not, that's normal. There's nothing wrong with your settings. The way these paints work is, you're putting on drops. Createx puts on a fairly large drop. As you continue to spray, the drops will begin to fill out and fill in between. Don't be alarmed and keep thinning harder and harder. Try to keep it as little thin as possible. I've mentioned this before. And then you've got to heat set it. Warm airflow is going to rapidly increase the drying. You don't want to just use it as do as you typically would with some paints and just keep spraying and spraying. Even though you're putting on mist coats, you don't want to keep building up and building up and building up layers. What's going to happen in the end, it's never going to dry. Or it might dry to the touch, but it'll never cure. It will be like latex, like a rubber glove. Make sure you're good and dry. And you're probably saying, what? This is different. But yeah, it is. Okay, and then you come back, do some more. I could probably increase the pressure. Okay, stop, don't go overboard. It's very tempting, but just stop. Dry it some more. I'm not right up on it. I'm kind of away, and I'm just blowing warm air across it. And as you can see, that's dry, that's cured. Obviously it needs more. Make sure I'm probably going to put some more paint in the cup. Okay. Let's see, I'm trying to reach around the camera, so bear with me. Obviously safety is important. You still need to wear a mask. You still need to protect yourself from breathing the vapors. You need to worry about overspraying things. I'm kind of going gangster here. But I'm not laying it on thick. That's the worst thing you can do. Okay, that's a pretty good solid coverage. 3 coats, and 3 coats is the absolute minimum. Now I'm used to these paints. I'm used to kind of thinning them and spraying them, and I've managed to get myself down to being able to do it in 3 coats with an opaque color. That is, actually, it wouldn't hurt to have one more coat, from what I can see. Put it on thin, heat cure each layer. It's going to dry flat, obviously. They all dry flat. You know how long it took me to get to this point with these paints? You'd be amazed. I went through so many issues and problems and thinning, and I didn't know what was to expect, and it was speckly, and I was thinning more. And my first model that I tried with these, by the time I got halfway through with it, it was just this dripping thing. It was dripping paint runs. It just looked terrible. I mean, it was so thin. I used the wrong thinner. I was spraying, not spraying at a high enough pressure. I was, over thinning, not heat drying. The model never dried. It never dried. Even when I finally got enough on it, it had runs all in it. It looked terrible, and then it just never dried. Weeks and weeks later, it was still rubbery and sticky and just awful. It took me forever to get to this point, which looks simple, the way I'm doing it now, because I know now what to do and what to expect. And that's why I'm doing all these videos and this mundane stuff leading up to this, is to make people aware of what is involved in reality with these paints. It's not just plug into the airbrush, spray, and go to the next color and all that kind of stuff. Alright. I've cleaned the airbrush. I'm going to switch over to the Createx Thin with Future. As far as cleaning the airbrush, clean it with whatever you guys like. I'm still at the same pressure. You can see a difference here. I'm spraying it the same pressure, but I'm spraying with the finer part of the needle. As you can see, it's still speckly, but much finer. And because you got a lot of Future in here, I can get away with putting on a little bit more on each pass. Okay, so as you can see, speckly but finer, but you still need to dry it. Okay, it's still flat, and I forgot to show this, but here's the consistency. Much runnier. Okay, this is going to help you when you guys that are using the smaller needles, the more common modeling size airbrushes, needle combinations. And I'm not putting on near as much per pass. I'm kind of in the lighter, smaller needle range here with the airbrush. You know, but I'm not going to just, I'm so tempted to keep going and going. But don't, resist that temptation. Resist it and dry it. Okay? You're going to need at least 3 light coats. 4 would be really more realistic of either way. However you spray this stuff, it just takes several coats. It's not a one coat. It's not a mist it and then put on a wet coat. Avoid the heavy coat. Yeah, I'm happy with that. At least for this demonstration, that's plenty good. All right, so there's the 2 different panels. This is the one with the future down on the bottom. It's slightly glossier. This is pretty much just flat. Same coverage, same colors, pretty much the same. Not much visual difference whatsoever. I took a big risk by masking this raw. But I did use the Tamiya. It's low tack. And I had the luck of the gods on my side, but I would never recommend doing that on your model. If you get any kind of a blemish, a flaw, make a mistake, scratch it, peel some off with tape or whatever, you're screwed. This is a one-shot paint. You've got one shot. Because if you sand it, and sand on it, it's like rubber. It comes off like rubber bits. The future version is a little more resilient. It just comes off in this rubbery kind of texture. No matter, I mean, you can maybe just get away with a tiny bit. But it's this rubbery, almost like latex. You can't patch that and hide that. If it peels especially, you're screwed. There's no way to feather it so finely and then be able to patch it or polish it out or sand it out or wet sand it. Wet sanding obviously is going to be a big problem with water-based paint. I'm going to wet this. It emulsifies the paint. Works, kind of feathers a little better that way, but patching and matching this and everything is a real bear. Trust me. It's a real bear. Your body has to be perfect. You probably don't want to take a model kit and grab the body and hood and parts out that you're going to paint them, and then go build the model, and then find out later that you've got to do some modification because patching where you've modified or filled or fixed is going to be dang near, it's going to be a nightmare and a lot of work. It's not worth it. It's not as forgiving as enamels and things like that you can sand and patch and feather and cover. And so the only way around that, and the very, very important thing, is to clear these, or protect, I should say, more than clear. You have to protect each spray, each layer. I mean, by layer, I mean at this point, as soon as you can, you want to protect this with a protectant, a clear. You can use any clear you want. Krylon clear. You could use dull coat. Dull coat would even work fine. It's a flat paint, and I actually do use dull coat fairly often because it flashes off really fast. It goes on very thin. You can see where you're spraying it and how much you've sprayed because of just the nature of the flat dull coat. And it's a good protectant. It's a very good protectant because the shine of these paints, that big glossy beautiful glass shine, comes from the clear coat. It's not from the finish of the paint. It's from the clear coat. So You have to intercoat these paints, or that's what it's called, because you're doing sub layers of clear, and then when you're finally done, you're going to hit it with a clear coat, you know, urethane or whatever you prefer for your clear, and that's what you're going to buff and polish and everything if you go that far with it. Another thing is that if you leave it raw like this, man, it picks up fingerprints, dust, dirt. It just attracts that stuff, and then if you try to clean it off, it leaves a blemish. You just can't leave it as it is. No matter how dry, it is going to get scratched, damaged, blemished. There's going to be spots in it from handling and stuff like that. You have to clear it. Absolutely have to. Or protect it. Interclear, whatever you want to call it. And that was my biggest point of doing this whole panel thing here, was to show. And I got lucky. This paint actually did well. It went on well. Sprayed well. It's adhered well. I've got lucky. Chances are, when you're first starting out with this, you're not going to get near as lucky as I have with this panel. I mean, I actually masked all that and nothing happened. That's rare. It has a rubberiness to it. I mean, it doesn't feel like rubber, but it has that quality to it, which is really sucky when it comes to doing repairs. And so I guess I'll commence this part, and I'll show a lot of work using these paints. And I wonder how many people are saying, you know, I think I'm going to try something else at this point. Wouldn't be surprised. It can be done, but it's important to know all these little things, because any one of these little things will ruin your day. It's different. It's so different.